What's going on, everybody? I can't believe I'm saying this, but welcome to the final for the Millie of this season. Bittersweet, made a little bit sweeter because my Eagles are in the Super Bowl. But TwoGun, how are you feeling about this game? How excited are you?
It's weird. It's like it's such a public game and such an the players that get usage are so obvious that it makes me feel weird. And I'm trying to figure out, like, for Showdown, what are some kind of different ideas I can make, to have a unique lineup. Because when it comes to these like big Showdown contests, people often they try to guess what's exactly going to happen, and they get really chalky. And this is actually where it helps to be more contrarian the fewer the games there are, because we talked about this before. When you have a bunch of games, well, joining the chalk's a good idea. But when there's just one game, and obviously you're going to have to use some players that everyone else uses, and it's just all you need is one thing to go your way. You don't need everything to go your way. You just need one thing to go your way, really. And that can often win you the Showdown. You do it right.
Yeah, I also think it's worth mentioning the fact that, like, maybe more than ever, it really depends on what contest you're playing, right? Where these showdowns, if you're trying to win $1 million in one of these like massive lottery contests, you're going to have to make some very different decisions than if you're trying to win a 300-person single entry contest, something like that. So we're going to talk through Showdown first. We'll talk about the different contest styles, the different type of risks you want to take in single entry versus in MME, things of that nature. And then we will close it out, hopefully, with our friend PropGod talking some props. We'll look at some underdog picks. But we're going to start here with Showdown. So, TwoGun, before we bring up some of the Showdown data that we have, do you have any just like initial thoughts on maybe number one, like, do you think that the field is building for some specific game plan or game script? And do you want to build for a specific game script?
I think people are definitely going to be building for a shootout. And I think they're going to try to use the players that have gotten a lot of usage lately. I think Xavier Worthy is going to be extremely popular, and pretty much overowned. I will be under on him, but I'm definitely going to have him in some of my lineups. Like, I'm not going zero Xavier Worthy by any means.
The very first thing that I notice about the slate, I'm just going to bring up the pricing now, is the price on not just Worthy, but Worthy and Dallas Goedert. Like that was the first and second thing that I noticed about this slate. Xavier Worthy just $8,000 as a flex. Dallas Goedert $5,800 as a flex. I think these two are going to be massively owned. In single entry, it would not surprise me if they're even more popular than this. One other thing I'll say, I think Mahomes' flex ownership will be a lot higher than this. I think it might even be like double this, where I don't expect him to be the most popular captain. Maybe he'll be up there in captain ownership, but I think he will be among, if not the single highest flex owned player. So we'll talk through all this ownership stuff as well. But I love the fact that you started with Worthy, because his price and Goddard's price, as far as the skill position players go, like those are the two who are just very clearly underpriced based on their usage and production so far this postseason.
Right. And it's Dallas Goedert. He's been around for a few years. Like, at least with Worthy, I get it. Like, he's really kind of established himself as the wide receiver one now. Dallas Goedert, that's just people needing some salary relief at this point. Because if you don't, if you want to somehow have Jalen Hurts and or Saquon Barkley and Patrick Mahomes, well, then you got to have a Dallas Goedert in there too. Type salary relief, because people aren't going to want to use a lot of the guys that are, call it, sub 4K or so. Maybe Juju Smith-Schuster, I mean, I don't think people are going to want to use Samaje Perine that much. But like, people are going to not want to use Kareem Hunt that much. They're definitely not going to want to use Pacheco. They're not going to want to use the defenses. They might want to use a kicker if they have to. I just think that people are just going to be like, okay, this is a safe guy to use. And you're going to have kind of a few like we often will do a chalk lineup. My guess is you're going to have like 3 or 4 chalk lineups that are really dominating in terms of ownership in these contests. And we can go through it if you want.
I agree. So why don't we actually try and build out what that chalk lineup looks like here? And before we even do that, let's take a look quickly at what we've got for our captain optimals and our captain projected ownership. So you can see it here on the screen. It looks like the 2 most popular captains, which I think is probably correct, are Saquon and Jalen Hurts. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Travis Kelce go up in captain ownership. If he, Worthy, and Mahomes were kind of all in the same like 10 to 15% range together. But I do think Hurts and Barkley are going to be not head and shoulders above the rest, but like in a very clear tier 1 of ownership. How does your initial just like gut reaction on ownership look here? Do you think that what we have is correct or what I've just said is correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it. Yeah, I think a lot of it's right. I think people are going to be playing Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley a little too much together. I mean, in some way, they're going to be because they are at the end of the day they are negatively correlated.
Yeah.
But people are going to play them way too much together, and then they're going to like kind of like try to like scramble to find value in these other places. And I definitely can see Xavier Worthy's being up there with Jalen Hurts and Saquon, definitely the number 1 chief, but combined with his usage and his price, and we could create like a Worthy captain. It's just going to be a lot easier to make a lineup that people like with Xavier Worthy a captain. Saquon a captain, they're going to want to do it, but it makes it a lot harder. You're going to have to start using some players they don't want to use.
Yeah. I think I like your point on Hurts and Barkley potentially being overowned together, because it also gets to your point of like, what is the most recent thing that people saw? Hurts ran for 3 touchdowns. Barkley ran for 3 touchdowns. That's what's in people's mind. And it makes them kind of overlook the fact that all season long, to your point, they've been really inversely correlated. When Hurts has had those rushing touchdown games, more often than not, it has meant that Barkley doesn't get there. And when Barkley gets there, it usually means he's getting there with those like long explosive touchdowns, which means Hurts doesn't get the rushing touchdowns. So he doesn't get there. So I definitely am with you on this idea of one or the other, not both, and using the fact that the field is not really going to be thinking that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, like I already built a good amount of lineups, and I'm trying to build some more. Another thing I think people are going to do is really jam the 3-3 type build, or try to really keep it a balanced build, because everyone's expecting a good game, and shit, maybe it's going to be rigged for a good game. I don't know. I'm not like a conspiracy theorist by any means, but I mean, these are 2 good teams. You think it would be a good game, and the NFL wants a good game. Maybe it's not a good game. Maybe one team just kicks the shit out of the other team.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the idea of 5-1 builds or 4-2 salary builds in both directions. I think either team can kick the shit out of the other team. I don't really think either team is like that much. The fact that both teams are good means that on any given Sunday, one of them could just kick the shit out of the other one.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the matchups chart that Frank has built, I'm also going to talk a ton about this on the matchups show this week. But on paper, Philadelphia has the advantage at most positions and in most just like areas. So we're talking rush offense versus rush defense, pass offense versus pass defense. When you even look at the way these teams like to cover, the type of defensive tendencies, coverage tendencies that they have, Philly has the advantage in most places. The big equalizers are Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and Spagnuolo to some degree as well. So I think this is a fascinating matchup in that sense, but it also means that we're probably going to have a pretty good game. I do think it would be tough for either of these teams to separate, but if everyone is building under the assumption that it's a close game and no one is building for a Chiefs 3-possession win or an Eagles 3-possession win, then actually going to that type of game script could potentially be really advantageous in Showdown. So I think that's a great call out. All right, TwoGun, let's see if we can build what we think is going to be the chalk lineup here. Where do you think you want to start? Before we even select the captain, I think where I want to start is just by throwing Worthy and Goddard in here as flex plays.
Okay, I want to do one where we have Worthy as the captain and one where we don't have him as the captain.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Let's start with Worthy as the captain then. I definitely want to throw Goddard in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got to have Mahomes, and I think we have to have Hurts.
Yeah.
So let's see. How difficult is that to do? So, yeah, I mean, sometimes like in the regular season, we would have started this way. Like, here's the most popular skill guy on Kansas City, the most popular skill guy on Philly, or at least one of, and both of their quarterbacks. And we'd be left with like $2,300 per player in the last two spots. We've got $5,900 here. Yes, that's Worthy as the captain instead of either of the quarterbacks, but man, that's still a lot of salary to use. We can't use Saquon, but everybody else is on the table here. So where do you think people go next?
I think in this build, they're probably going for a Devontae Smith, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then let's see, and then whatever's left. And then they're using like a defense. Probably.
Yeah,
or they could go.
They could have gone to a kicker. They definitely would here, but
yeah. Or they could go.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see Gainwell. It wouldn't surprise me to see Noah Gray. I think it would surprise me like leaving this much money on the table. So in fact, let's take a look. AJ Brown 2,200. Is there anyone? Yeah. So like here, Juju. To me, like this is the line you got to stay clear of because this one will definitely be used a decent amount.
Yeah. So like this is I would call this a chalk lineup where the first four players are set and then the other two get some random ownership. Like those two guys will get a lot. If you start with Worthy, Goddard, Hurts, Mahomes, I say this is probably the final two combo used the most. But there will be some people that use, Devontae Smith and another guy, or they might use a kicker. I'm not even sure who would fit if they use a kicker. That might be kind of hard.
Well, I mean, this is also something that like this is part of the process of projecting ownership, right? It's building out specific lineups and seeing, okay, which one of these guys just randomly fits as the last man in to a lot of builds. And so like this first build, Juju Smith-Schuster is the very obvious last piece in. So even if people aren't thrilled with Juju, the fact that they're just landing on him means he's going to get some ownership. Now, this is just one example of a lineup, so it doesn't mean that because we built this that he's going to be really popular.
Instead of AJ Brown, and then that would make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Let's see what happens if we switch Mahomes here into the captain spot.
Well, people aren't using that as much, right?
Say that again?
Right, because people aren't using that as much.
Well, it's tough to say. That's how we're projecting it, but one of the things that Caleb and I have noticed all season is we've been under projecting some quarterback ownership at times, and I think this is one of those situations where I think Mahomes is going to be a lot more popular than what we're currently projecting. So I would double his flex ownership from where we have it, and I think there's a good chance that his captain ownership gets to that like 10 to 15% range as well. So it's not like people won't use this start, but I think what we need to do next is we need to try a Hurts captain lineup and then also a Saquon captain lineup. And maybe in the Saquon captain lineup, we don't use Jalen Hurts just to see if there's a straightforward build that way. But the whole purpose of this exercise is to kind of illustrate like these are the types of decisions that people are going to make. And so when you're building one of these lineups, like let's say you have a lot of conviction on Mahomes captain or a lot of conviction on the Worthy captain play that we just built, you want to make sure that you're differentiating with more than just one or two pieces in the rest of the lineup. Tell a different story than what most Worthy lineups are telling, that sort of thing. So
yeah, most Worthy lineups are going to use both quarterbacks. I think it's fair to say it. They're going to say this is a passing craziness going on.
And I think most Mahomes lineups will have both Worthy and Travis Kelce. Would you agree with that?
Probably.
So
I think is having Mahomes as captain is probably when you want to start using some of the shit guys.
Yeah, I mean, like here, if we had enough for Juju, I think that would be the play. I think we could also go Pirine here at $1,200. We're projecting both Juju and Pirine currently at like 20% flex ownership. Personally, I think Juju will get more than Pirine, but that's another one. Like I need to build more lineups and see what people can actually fit, because it may be the case that more often than not you're left with $1,600 or $1,800 if you build some chalky lineups. In which case, you could get people going down to Pirine just because they have to.
Yeah, and he just needs one catch or whatever is how they'll think.
Yeah. All right, let's flip now to a Hertz captain lineup. And when we go Hertz, I think we've got to go Goddard. Now we need at least one of AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I think we'll see more AJ Brown. Part of that is Goddard and AJ Brown are the ones who had the really big game last week when Hertz was such a phenomenal captain. So where do you think people will go on the opposite side of the ball here? They're going to try to get to Mahomes, or are they going to say, you know what, that's a little bit too much money? All right. We go Mahomes.
Well, that's
now.
And then they use a $1,000 guy if they can, or they might use Hollywood Brown here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because if you go Hollywood, you still get an actual player here, like Hollywood and Noah Gray. I think makes a lot of sense in this lineup. If they did click Worthy here, just for the sake of it, like you only get $1,000, so now you're not getting Pirine either. Maybe they'd go Justin Watson, but
yeah,
who the hell knows? So I think you're right. I think it's Gray and Hollywood Brown, assuming they're going Mahomes, which I think they will do. Now, maybe some people would build this sort of thing and say, I want at least one of Worthy and Kelsey. And so maybe they do go down to Devontae Smith. I mean, $7,400 is cheap. So this could very much be a lineup we see as well. And let's see. Yeah, there's no upgrade available for Noah Gray. So
I do think we need to figure out. I mean, I think we need to point out. I think a lot of people want to have Saquon and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
and that's just all they're going to use. Maybe they'll use Saquon, Jalen Hurts, and Goddard. That's it.
Okay, so
that's like the 3 and the 3-3. That's the 3 Eagles they'll use.
All right, so instead of Devontae, you want Saquon, in which case, so now Worthy can go down. Like, this is tough. I think this might be the one scenario where you actually don't see Mahomes. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to. Yeah.
So, like, I think people would go like Worthy, Noah Gray, and now they get. I don't think they'd go Hollywood here. I think they'd go Butker.
Really?
Because now you're at least like telling a story of, hey, they move the ball with Worthy and Noah Gray, but then they have to settle for the field goal instead. So like that makes some sense. I don't know. As we do this, I'm kind of thinking that maybe we won't see as many Hurts and Barkley pairings as we initially thought, just because doing so makes it really hard to then fit Mahomes.
Well, you can if you put Goddard as captain.
Ah, that's a good call. That's a good call. All right, let's see what that looks like. There it is. Yep. So now they go Hollywood Brown. This is another one that you have to avoid. So
right there. So yeah, Noah Gray will probably get higher ownership than we think. I think Hollywood Brown will get a lot of ownership.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get but the funny thing is you can see people might have less kickers than we think. Especially since kickers do horribly. You shouldn't use a kicker with a quarterback, and people are going to want to use the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But
I'll push back on that, because that's something that you and I have talked about a lot this season, but it's not something that I've observed in ownership. I don't think people are unwilling to put in a kicker when they put in a quarterback, because they don't view it as like, hey, I've got a quarterback captain, I need the touchdowns. They view it more of like, if my quarterback's doing well, it means this offense is moving the ball, which means there are going to be some field goal attempts. Mm-hmm. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think that we are correct when we say if you have a quarterback as your captain, you don't want his kicker because you want them scoring touchdowns, not settling. But it's as I said, like, it's not something that I've actually observed with the way that people build lineups.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like Butker could get some ownership. Maybe they use Butker here instead of Brown. I could also see that. Or they would, I don't know if they would use Elliott here. I think my point is more that the $5,000 area, just it's hard to get to it with these builds because if they're going to play a $5,000 player as Jeremy Goddard, maybe Hollywood Brown, and then they're stuck with needing a cheaper guy.
Yep.
The
last thing I want to build is what happens when people say the whole Philadelphia offense is Saquon Barkley, and they go back to having one of those games where there's just not a lot of passing. 21 attempts against Green Bay, 20 against the Rams, under 20 DraftKings points in both of those games for Hurts. So when that happens, I think they still go with one of the Philly trio wide receivers or receiving options, Goddard, Brown, or Devontae Smith. But it's not unfathomable if they would just do something like Barkley captain with Mahomes, Hollywood Worthy, and now you go to a kicker or something like that. So maybe like you could do something like this. Could also then switch Elliott to Butker or something like that. But I think, you know what? We actually have just enough for Goddard. So like this is another one that I think is definitely going to be built. Barkley captain, you do have Dallas Goddard, but then Mahomes with Worthy, Noah Gray, and Hollywood Brown. How does this look to you in terms of?
Yeah, I think Noah Gray is going to be. I think we're kind of showing that he's going to get some ownership out of all these guys.
Yeah. I definitely think so. And it also makes sense because I think people are going to just remember in their heads that, hey, who had a really big game against Philly 2 rounds ago? Like Higbee. And who had a really good game last week? Ertz. So they're going to want a tight end, but they're going to feel like they maybe can't get to Kelsey when Worthy is just $1,000 cheaper. I do, however, think like we have built these chalk lineups with Worthy instead of Kelsey a lot. And when possible, I do think people will be happy to get Kelsey instead or find lineups where they can play both of them. So
I think Worthy is going to be really popular.
Okay.
Somewhat at the expense of Kelsey. I think people are going to want to have Worthy or Kelsey. It's going to be people running Worthy. It's probably going to be like Kelsey and then Worthy. Sorry, Worthy and then Kelsey, and then like Hollywood Brown just kind of fits.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And it's just, you have to ask yourself if you're using this player pool where it's your Chiefs are all Mahomes and then those 3 guys, 2 out of those 3 guys, and then your Eagles are Hurts and Saquon, one or the other, and then Goddard's. Like, how are you going to be different? Like, how are you going to win? How are you going to not just split a pot and hope that you guys manage to be built up? So that's where I feel like I need to be different with every single lineup. And either it needs to be more lopsided game.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine if I use those players, but I want it to at least be lopsided. Generally, I'm using a defense or a kicker or something like that to make it a little more lopsided. Mm-hmm. Or I'm using a player we haven't really talked about that much. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue because let's talk single entries now. Single entry lineups, you're hand building these. Maybe you're in a contest with you're only trying to beat 300 people, or maybe like a max of 1,000 people instead of the 50 to 100,000 people.
Yeah, so that's what I'm building for the Mega Millionaire, the $4,000 entry, and I'm going to have a good dozen entries. I'm not going to just do 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
This is goddamn Super Bowl. This is the last thing for 8 months.
Yeah,
I gotta go big.
So, okay, so in one of these smaller contests, whether it's 300 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, would you agree that it's more about finding the unique combinations of players and not trying to find the 1% guy who's likely to fail, but like maybe he has a good game just completely out of the blue and he vaults you up the leaderboard that way?
I think both work.
Okay.
I generally go more for the first strategy, but in this game, with the Chiefs, their offense is just so weird. Like, the last few weeks have been weird. Like, the last few weeks has been different where Mahomes doesn't have that many attempts. And it all goes through Kelsey. Then it all goes through Worthy. So, but often it was like, no, he just throws it to like 10 different guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it could be a 1% guy. That's a little bit harder on the Eagles, right? Because like, what's a 1% guy that could, you really think Jahan Dotson's going to, I mean, if he catches a touchdown, It could work. I would. To be
Mhm.
fair, I have a Johan Dotson line. I remember saying his name right.
I think it's just Jahan.
Jahan. I mean, he's 1,600. He gets his touchdown. You're good. But outside of Jahan Dotson, who is there on the Eagles that like even gets snaps? No one.
Yeah, I think the worthwhile guy, especially in like if you're in one of the complete just lottery ticket type contests that is worth it on the Philly side, that's 1% owned, is Kenneth Gainwell. And you're not hoping that Gainwell just scores a touchdown on a drive where he's sparing Barkley for a play. You're building for the possibility that what happens if Saquon gets a first quarter injury and Gainwell is the back for 3/4 of football. And like that would suck. It would especially suck as an Eagles fan, but that is within the range of outcomes. And you can't say that for Dotson, right? Like if A.J. Brown gets hurt, Dotson's not stepping in and suddenly getting 8 targets in the game. If Barkley gets hurt, Gainwell's going to get a handful of receptions. He's going to be given a bunch of carries. He might score twice. So he would actually have that path to a ceiling. So I think if I were MMEing, I'd have 5% of Gainwell, maybe 10% of Gainwell if I was playing just one lineup. But I was in a contest against 100,000 other lineups. I'd probably play Gainwell. So I think that's the sort of thing that I would be thinking through. At least on the Philly side. On the Kansas City side, there are some guys who are going to be really low.
I mean, I think we're kind of picking at straws here because with Gainwell, it has to be a first quarter injury, at least first half injury. And then there's also, they'll probably have Shipley in there. I don't know.
No, they I don't think they would. The trust factor is just so much higher in Gainwell.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you're betting on an injury, which is like less than a 5% chance.
Less than a 5% chance, though, in a lineup where you're trying to finish first out of 100,000. Less than 5% is good.
That's
it's
true.
Really,
but what do we think his ownership is going to be?
1%.
What?
1%. We have it at 0.95.
All right. I don't know. I still think my Jahan Dotson idea is not terrible though. Just for the touchdown.
Yeah, I agree. But I think you and I agree that like,
both these guys are fine. Like you have them in 1 out of 20 lineups.
Yeah.
You do not have them in
right
20% of your lineups.
And I think you and I both agree that like if you're going to take chances on guys in this range, you might as well do it with Kansas City guys because we don't actually know who's going to be on the field, or more like it, we don't know who's going to be on the field for Kansas City on any given play. Right? We know it's going to be.
He will throw a touchdown to anybody at this point, I think. And the last few games have made people focus too much on those 3 receivers.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not how he does. That's just not how Kansas City rolls. They will. Yeah, I mean, like obviously, like we're building. We're showing there'll be some love for Juju, and there'll be some love for Noah Gray. I mean, I don't really want to say it. You know who I
know
love.
You're going to say it.
What?
You're going to say DeAndre Hopkins at 4,400.
Right, because no one's going to use him.
Yeah. He, by the way, he did one of these targets was in the end zone. So it's like, yeah, if you game log watch, he has 2.1 fantasy points, but he had the chance for 8 at one time in the last games. And if he did that at 4,400, if he got like 3 receptions, 30 yards, and a touchdown, he probably beats the kickers, Pacheco, the defenses, and anyone below that. So I agree with you. He's 100% in play.
But his ownership, we're showing it to be like 1%.
Yeah, it's going to be low. It's going to be so low because he's right in the middle of the kickers and the defenses.
Right.
If he was below the defenses, he'd actually get some ownership, but I just don't think there's any way.
Exactly, and that's where people overthink $2,000 in this thing.
Yeah.
Where it's better to be different because if DeAndre Hopkins sucks and he puts up 2 points, it doesn't matter if you pay $4,400 for him or $2,400 for him. You're gonna lose. Yeah. You're gonna lose. So it's a matter of who do you choose under sub 6,000 really that scores the most points, and you want to have them in your lineup. And I'm certainly not having him in like half my lineups or anything, but I'm definitely having him more than 5%. Let's just leave it at that.
I think one other thing to potentially think about, and this is not for single entry players. This again, like if you're doing one lineup, but it's in one of these 150 max contests, and you're just trying to make $1 million off of $20 or whatever the big contest is this week. I do think Remigio is somewhat interesting at $200 because he's going to be virtually unowned. I would stack him with the Kansas City defense. The double dip, right? It never ever works. But what if it did work once? And the second thing there, he almost returned one for a touchdown last week, the last game. But there's also like the Andy Reid effect of, that they're going to have one or two just like very creative plays drawn up, and one of them might be for him offensively. He might have one snap in the entire game, but that one snap is a designed end around to him with something on the other side of the field that's meant to be a distraction where they're trying to get a big play out of it, and maybe it works. So the reason why I bring this up too is just because whenever you have a guy with a chance to get a single point at the stone cold minimum, as long as you then use all the salary in the rest of the lineup, I think that just makes sense, because it might be the case that like those other five with the captain that you have selected is just the optimal first five. And then if no other cheapies like have a good game, and maybe you only get 1 point out of it, that might be all you need. So
is he going to get 1 point? It sounds like he's getting either 6 or 0.
Well, he could take the end around for 10 yards instead of going for a 60-yard touchdown.
Does he even get an end around?
He very well might not. I mean,
when
was the last time he had a touch offensively? It was in the game that didn't actually count or didn't matter to them.
Right. So he's either returning a punt or whatever for a touchdown, or he's getting a 0.
Yeah.
Which I don't hate it. But you have to stack it with the Chiefs defense.
Yeah. All right. Enough of these bottom barrel guys where you're hoping for a point or hoping for 6 points. We started this little bit of a conversation here with the idea of that you can get different with some of these like really cheap and contrarian players, or you can get different just by going to unique combinations of players. So let's talk about some unique combinations of players. And the first combination that I want to go to is AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, because remember when we started this exercise, when we were building these chalky lineups, how often did we go right to Dallas Goedert to click his name because of the price and what he allows you to fit in terms of getting both quarterbacks and Saquon. So I think going to two Philly pass catchers without Dallas Goedert is immediately going to make you different from the field.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go about it. You do that, and then you're probably using Jalen Hurts and not Saquon.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just asking too much from the Philly offense at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless you wanted to build for the unlikely scenario where Philly wins by 3 touchdowns.
Actually, that's fine. You're right.
Yeah.
Doing Saquon, even then, I just don't like doing that much heavy players for that. But I'm cool doing the 5-1.
Mm-hmm.
But I might do it a little bit differently, where because then you have nothing left with Saquon.
One case I will make for putting Saquon in a lineup like this, and you could actually have Saquon the captain. You could do like whatever you want. You could make one of the receivers the captain to get a little bit more money here. One thing I like about it is, let's say you didn't take Saquon. Let's say you went Mahomes. You do not have enough money to go Kelsey or Worthy. So immediately, you're stuck with, you're now asking Mahomes to be relevant enough to score enough fantasy points that he's worth taking at $10,000 instead of a $12,000 Saquon Barkley, but he can't have any of that production go to either of his first 2 targets. So that to me seems like a bit of a narrow outcome, in which case it actually does make a little bit of sense to go Barkley instead, because now you get to just fade this trio. $2,700 is not as much money as I want to have left. So I do think I'd probably make this an AJ Brown captain instead.
Or I would just get rid of one of Devontae Smith or AJ Brown. But what I like about where we're going here is the idea of a 4-2 or a 5-1, heavy on one side. Then you're probably going to want to use a defense or maybe a kicker or something like that. And I think Jalen Hurts and Mahomes are both, it's weird to say over-owned, but I think the combination of them together is going to be over-owned at the very least, because
I think you can make the case a little bit easier for Mahomes just because he doesn't have the touchdown rushing equity that Hurts has, right? I mean, look how many rushing touchdowns he's had this season. I think it's 16 at this point. Like, man, that gives you such a strong floor from
I just think people are going to think it's the Super Bowl and it's Mahomes.
Mhm.
And you know what? They're not wrong.
They're not wrong, but Mahomes' like superhero skill set is winning games and converting first downs and not necessarily putting up these massive fantasy
Because let's
points.
look at the Houston game.
Yeah.
He put up 12 points.
Mm-hmm.
12.
Yeah.
I'm far more likely to not use Mahomes than I am Hurts, but I'm probably gonna have Hurts or Saquon. I'll probably have Hurts or Saquon in every single lineup because there's two teams, right? Yeah. But I generally won't have them together.
One final thing I want to say here is I'm having a pretty difficult time, like just diving into the Kansas City defensive tendencies and things of that nature and being able to point to specific Eagles. I think this is one of the most fascinating offense versus defense matchups, which we'll talk about momentarily. And then I'm going to talk about at length, like I said, on the matchup show. But that to me is like another reason to just, when you're trying to figure out which Eagles to play, man, just play the ownership game. Just go to the unique combinations because it's difficult for everybody to figure out who's going to actually produce. And yes, Dallas Goedert's $5,800 price tag is a gift. He's very clearly significantly underpriced. But if he has a game where he has 5 catches for 60 yards, like he's going over all of his props, and it's still only 11 DraftKings points. So I do think there's a decent chance that he too is overowned, at least overowned among Eagles, like Eagles lineups that do well. So, or lineups where the Eagles do well. So I think that's my biggest lean for Showdown. Any final thoughts on Showdown for you?
No, not really. I just, I think there's a few ways to go about this. We've kind of talked about it.
Real quick, should we build out like a Kansas City dominant lineup before we go?
Sure. Okay. I think that's where we're gonna, I think I would use the Chiefs defense. You don't have to use captain, but I would.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up this captain data again real quick. The two guys we're showing the most leverage on, Patrick Mahomes and AJ Brown. Like I said, I think Mahomes will be more like 10 to 15% as the captain. So still good leverage there, but not quite the like a double the projected ownership leverage that we're getting with AJ Brown. Does this make you want to start a Kansas City dominant lineup with Mahomes at the captain?
Actually, it's tough because if Mahomes is scoring a lot of fantasy points, it probably means they're coming from behind or it's a close game and he's throwing the ball. Mm. So dominant lineup, I mean, I might use Kelsey or Worthy or whoever a captain. Or you could even use the Chiefs defense as captain.
Okay. You might run out of money if you do that, but so I assume you would want Mahomes in here somewhere.
Yeah, I'd have Mahomes. Okay. Then I'd have probably Kareem Hunt, and I'd probably have Kelsey or Worthy. And then you use Jalen Hurts or Saquon, and so
like Hurts and Devontae, or Hurts and Xavier Worthy, and maybe it's just Hurts. It could also, it can't be just Saquon, but yeah, I think this works. I also think this is not a bad idea either. You have Saquon, and you hope like they score 1 touchdown. It's him. He also has a few receptions, and then you'd have to go down. Like maybe this is Hollywood Brown.
This is where or Dallas Goedert.
Yeah.
See, this is where I would use Saquon and Dallas Goedert in a unique way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this makes sense.
These guys being very chalky. This is not a chalky lineup.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is a lineup I would probably use. Maybe I don't think I'm going to have this exact lineup, but this is something I would consider having.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Underdog, and we're here on Underdog, but
I think PropGod back, isn't he?
Hmm?
I see him in the comments.
Prop, get your ass in the StreamYard lobby so you can join the show, dude. Showing up in chat. That's funny. Hopefully Prop can join any minute now, but you and I, TwoGun, we can start talking about the props and hopefully he can join us. That's so funny. Real quick, just a note to everyone. We are showing all of the props here on Underdog, but the props that we're giving out here, you can use anywhere. You can use them on Prize Picks. You can use them on your favorite sports book. It does not matter. They are pretty much good everywhere. Of course, if you are using them on a sports book, like you want to make sure that you're not going into a ton of juice when we don't have to pay any juice here on Underdog. But I mentioned earlier that I am struggling to find leans on the Philadelphia side offensively. And that's continuing into the prop side of things where my favorite props so far, mostly on the Kansas City side. So I'll start us off here. Xavier Worthy, under 21.5 longest reception. We've been going to this longest reception prop all season and doing really, really well with them, but almost always to the over. This time I'm going under. Worthy is under in 14 of 18 games, and Philly is the best defense in the league at preventing explosive plays. Of course, Worthy with his speed, like it feels bad. It feels scary, but the math doesn't get much better than under in 14 of 18 going up against the team that it's hardest to get the explosive plays against.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm fading Worthy a lot. So, but
I know
I'm a little bit less of a prop guy. I'm more of a, I look at it as like pick six or like a ownership thing. Mm-hmm. But I do think that he's just kind of gotten bid up too much in general. And you kind of were talking about their the Chiefs are looking for short, controlled, lack of interceptions.
Yes.
And that doesn't bode well for long receptions.
Well, it also then makes sense to go to the Mahomes under on 0.5 interceptions here. I know this is one that you seem to like as well. And you just mentioned the average depth of target. Mahomes is dead last in the playoffs in average depth of target amongst every single quarterback who has thrown a pass, except for one. Teddy Bridgewater has thrown one pass and had a lower average depth of target on that one pass that Mahomes has this postseason, but he's below everybody else and kind of considerably below everyone else. Their entire offense is kind of predicated on these very easy completions, taking what the defense gives them. We know that teams have been playing too high against Kansas City for years now, and they have just kind of mastered the art of, okay, we're just going to success rate you to death then. Just posting massive success rates. For those unfamiliar with the term, success rate is just like a play is deemed successful if the play improves your chances of gaining a first down on that series. So on first down, it could be 4 yards. On 2nd and 8, it could be 4 yards. On 2nd and 6, it might only be 3 yards. Just getting what the defense gives you, staying ahead of schedule, making it easy to pick up these first downs. Kansas City has just kind of mastered that. And as a result, Mahomes has thrown 1 interception in his last 9 postseason games. Philadelphia, middle of the road in interceptions this year. This is another one that just seems kind of extremely strong from a mathematical standpoint, too.
Yeah, I think we, kind of onto something here of that Kansas City just plays a little bit differently in the playoffs than they do in the regular season. So, kind of respect that, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you think that these two are positively correlated, by the way, where you're saying hey, if Mahomes is throwing short all game long, it's going to be a lot harder for Worthy to get to over the 21.5, but also means Mahomes is less likely to throw a pick.
Yeah, of course, because he's not slinging it long.
Yeah.
That's probably when because if you're a quarterback and you're like, okay, well, I threw it interception, but it's kind of like a punt.
Yeah. Do you have any other picks you want to go to? I've got 2 more that I really like if you want me to just go to those.
It's funny because I was thinking about Mahomes passing attempts, but I just don't see it on that one. I just don't – maybe I'm just overthinking it, but this Saquon 130.5 rush reception yards just seems insanely high, and I want to take that under. But maybe that's just like a – sticker shock to me in the Super Bowl, but that's just a lot. And I could see this game going under just because what we talked about, the Kansas City has a 9-minute long drive.
Yeah.
Short passes that no incompletions.
Mm-hmm.
And the game just ends. So I kind of would like to build props that are more for and under.
Sorry. So which one did you bring up?
Saquon rush
Okay, yeah.
reception, because people always overthink his reception yards. I'm seeing 130, by the way, on DraftKings Sportsbook or on Pick 6. I'm seeing 130 on Pick 6.
Yeah. I like this call out because it's worth mentioning. He finished at 118 last game with a 60-yard run. Like this number is so crazy high that it kind of implies that he's going to hit the home run, and just don't know that he does against Kansas City. Like they're such a well-coached defense that if a team is finally able to figure out, okay, we're going to give up yards to Saquon, he's going to rip off 8-yard runs, 12-yard runs. But we're just not going to let him get the 60-yarder. If a team can actually figure out how to do that, Kansas City's at the top of the list to me. So, yeah, I mean, this is just a really big number. I think last game was the highest rushing yard total that DraftKings Sportsbook had ever posted, and he went under it, only finished with 118. I think last week it was like 126.5 or something, but this isn't that much lower.
And by the way, that's a lower number. I'm seeing 130.5 on Pick 6 on DraftKings Sportsbook.
Yeah.
It's at some point, like, you would think other people would have sticker shock, but maybe they don't. I don't really know what the average person thinks on this regards. But
PropGod, welcome in, my friend.
Man,
last.
when I knew we were doing a night show, I got a little nervous because I knew my sleep schedule could be crazy. So my apologies, fellas. But
no, you're all good. We're happy to have you here. We're talking props now. So we already went through all of Showdown. Prop, just to give you a quick recap here, what we have so far. We got Worthy under 21.5, longest reception. This is my favorite one of the entire Super Bowl, under in 14 of 18 games this season, and Philly the best in the league at preventing explosive pass plays. Correlating that with no interception from Mahomes, he's got the lowest average depth of target in the postseason for any quarterback, and only one interception in his last 9 postseason games. So what do you think of these first two? And then we also have Saquon under 127.5 rush plus receiving yards.
Oh, we're going to under on Saquon. Okay. So I'm not mad at the Worthy look, like you said. It's been hard for this Chiefs team to get vertical all season. So I'm not mad at that under there. Mahomes definitely does protect the ball in the postseason. So, excuse me. I like both of those. When it comes to the Barkley thing, that's like the biggest dilemma for me in this game is because I know what Saquon can do. The home run hitter, but I know that the Chiefs are the best at limiting what he does best as far as the explosive runs. Well, I think they were like top 4 as far as defensively. So I want to see who wins this battle in the trenches when it comes to the Philly run game and the Chiefs defense, because James Cook was able to run the ball really well last week. I thought that was surprising, and Buffalo went away from it, and I think that's what ended up hurting them. So I think, to me, Saquon is the MVP of this Philly team. So I feel like for them to get it done, he has to be impactful. So if he's going under, I know we don't talk about wins and losses. Are you expecting Philly not to win, or what was your angle with the lower?
So my thought here is TwoGun really brought this up because of the 130.5 number on Pick 6. And my thought here is that the under on Saquon is a much better play on Pick 6 than underdog, because we know people are going to want to bet on Saquon to do what he's done all season. So I think that under on Pick 6 is going to be a really strong one in the sense that it's going to leverage so much of your competition. I like it more there than I like it here on underdog.
Okay. No, I'm not mad at that. And I know that's the way that TwoGun has been successful all the time with when it comes to the DFS and everything. So I'm not mad at it. Fade the public, and it usually works out in your favor.
I got one more question for you here, Prop, on Saquon. I thought watching that Kansas City Buffalo game that part of the reason why James Cook had the success he had was that Kansas City really made an effort to not let Josh Allen beat them with his legs. Are you expecting them to kind of treat Jalen Hurts the same way, or do you think they will be more willing to let Hurts beat them than they were with Josh Allen, in large part because Saquon is that much scarier than James Cook?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one because how healthy is Hurts going to be? Now he was moving around against Washington, but he didn't move around as much as he usually would. So
Yeah.
it's tough for me. I'll have to see what Hurts' health looks like, because I do think that makes the offense that much more deadly. I thought it was a lot of times against Washington where he could have kept it on RPO and took off, but he didn't. Was that because of health, or were they just trying to feed Saquon? So I think that would be the biggest question for me. But I think that's something we might not know until the game is going, because if he shows the ability to run, then that could change what they want to do on defense. So that one's kind of tough for me to give an answer pregame, because that injury weighs a lot on my mind as far as moving, what to expect from Hurts, because then how would the defense react?
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I also think this is a good segue into one of my favorite picks of the slate. Actually, my favorite pick on the Philadelphia side. Maybe it's not up in this moment. Oh, there it is. Over 12.5 for Hurts' longest rush, I think is pretty solid. You mentioned the health for Hurts. I thought that he looked pretty normal as soon as he got going downhill, but running in a curved line and the lateral quickness, I thought that's where you could tell that he wasn't quite himself. So actually, I want to bring this up to over 19.5 for 2.17x. He's gotten a 20-plus yard run in 8 of 18 games this season. Kansas City has been vulnerable to scrambles, and if they feel like maybe Hurts is any less mobile than usual, maybe they don't make quite the concerted effort to slow it down. So I think this is a good one for Hurts, and I would also very much say the Hurts longest rush with the Saquon under, I do think is very positively correlated, because now you're telling the story that, hey, when Hurts threatens the idea that he's giving the ball to Saquon, Kansas City's going to react. Remember in the Los Angeles game for Philadelphia, Hurts had that 40-plus yard touchdown run right away. Why? Because every single guy in the Rams defense went flying towards Saquon. Jordan Mailata didn't even have someone to block on that long touchdown run. So I like this pairing, and then I also think the Hurts over 19.5 longest rush for 2.17x is just good on its own as well.
Yeah, I like that because I've been fading the Kansas City defense with mobile quarterbacks, especially on the second half of the season anyway. And I looked at the number that you got. I mean, Josh Allen had a 13-yard run. CJ Stroud had a 28-yard run. Yeah. I was on his rush yards in that game. Bo Nix, 27-yard carry. Russell Wilson had a 15-yard carry. That means I can at least get a 10-yard rush to do that. So, yeah, I'm not mad at that at all. Josh Allen had a 26-yarder in the first meeting too. So, and Lamar to begin the season had a 16-yard run. So I'm not mad at that. Yeah, I could get with you there on that longest rush. I think that's a good angle.
Eric is also bringing up the point that it sure seemed in the last two huge playoff games for Kansas City against Baltimore and against Buffalo. Man, if those teams had just continued to run the ball, continued to take advantage of the way that they were running the ball, and like both of those teams also, I don't think it's an accident. They have the threat in the run game of the quarterback keeping it as well. Like so often we talk about one of the reasons why Philadelphia has been so successful on the ground is because teams can't play single high against them, which means teams are in large part choosing, like, do we send that extra man to stop the run or do we get beat by A.J. Brown? But man, having that third answer as well, that they commit to the run, but then Hurts actually keeps it. Like it makes it so hard for the defense. They kind of have no answers. By the way, we have a real nice comment here. Love this approach. I think we've enjoyed like just underdog as a whole this season, and really these longest rush props, like PropGod, like all season we've been crushing these. So I really, I'm gonna miss them for sure once this Super Bowl is over.
Yeah, it was exciting. I kind of felt like, for me, I started looking at it maybe like it's probably like 6 or 7 weeks into the season. So now I'm just excited to be able to bet on these the full season next year. I feel like just football season as a whole just flew by us. It
really did. Yeah. It did. I think part of that advantage too is knowing that like we at FTN with our charted data and the explosive play data on both the offensive and defensive end, like that just gives us an advantage because we know underdog isn't looking at that kind of data when they are setting these lines. So
exactly.
Definitely think it's a sustainable advantage, which isn't always the case. Cedric, you're saying hit the like button. Yes, we would very much appreciate if you hit the like button, subscribe to the FTN channel as well. And reminder, guys, you can watch this show throughout the rest of the week. You don't have to only watch live. So maybe you're here just catching the last half. When we're done, go back, take a look, and a listen to all the Showdown stuff that we touched on earlier. TwoGun, the next place I want to go is a Samaje Perine pick that we've been on for a lot of this season. How do you feel about over 7.5 receiving yards for Perine?
He needs what, 1 or 2 catches?
Probably just one. I mean, he's been really impressive in terms of like most of the time that you take a guy who's just playing pass down work, you expect him to have a lot of like 0, 2, 4 yard receptions where they're just these like useless checkdowns. His yards per reception is phenomenal, and he's been over this number in the vast majority of games this season. Let me see what the exact count actually is, but like nothing against Houston, and then only had the 1 reception against Buffalo, but it was the 17-yarder to ice the game. So I think the fact that he hasn't been used in terms of like getting the targets here in the postseason is the reason why we're getting such a favorable number here, but he's still on the field. He's still getting those routes. And importantly, Philadelphia's defense is so good on early downs that I do think we'll see more 2nd and long, 3rd and medium, 3rd and short, 3rd and long for Kansas City this week than we've seen in the last few weeks, which will help Perine get on the field.
Yeah, it just seems like it's a 65-35 in favor. Yeah. So you might as well take it.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He's hit this in 16 of 19 games this season, and 2 of those misses were in the first 4 weeks. So this has been an awesome one. I don't think it's quite that high in terms of probability because, like we've said, like some of those games were 1 reception, 17 yards, 1 reception, 15 yards, things of that nature. But it's just a really strong one.
Yeah, it's funny because like looking at his rushing, and I'm like, why am I doing that? No, I'm surprised that they're dealing that line, to be honest. It seems because he's so consistent in how that he generally gets at least a couple targets. Like he gets like 1 to 4 targets. So I'm surprised that they're letting you choose that line. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. I also think you can ladder this one. I have no issue with that. I think the ladder opportunities I have found are better on sports books this week than here on Underdog. I will make that point. But PropGod, how do you feel about Perine and where do you want to go to next?
So Perine was actually one of my looks. I know I wasn't able to talk to you because I was asleep. Sorry, chat, but yeah, I was gonna send that in. So I love it. I took it last week against Buffalo, and it got sweaty. But what happened? He got it that last drive when Kansas City after they forced a turnover. So I just think the line is too low, and he's the number 1 pass catching option out of the backfield for Kansas City. We see with Pacheco, I don't know what's going on, but he's just not being utilized at all. Really, what he had, I don't even think he had 5 carries last week, if that. So I think when it comes to receiving game, Perine will be there for little simple check downs and things like that. And I feel like, me personally, I think this Super Bowl is going to be high scoring, like it was the last time these 2 teams faced off. I know the defensive numbers are great for both teams, but I think we're in for an exciting game, and I think I think he has a lot of potential to this line as far as Perine. And then
what I think is an important point about Perine too, that 17-yarder to ice the game last week, that was a play designed specifically for Perine to be the guy who was open and for Perine to pick up the first down. That like it wasn't a situation where he just was lucky that he was an outlet on a play and there was broken coverage, so Mahomes found him. Like they were designed the play to get Perine open to take advantage of the coverage there. So anytime that you're seeing like that type of belief in Perine's ability and his reliability and the fact that he's just on the field for that play to begin with, all just, I think, really encouraging signs. Like TwoGun said, I'm surprised that they're still hanging this line, that it's not 10.5 or 11.5, where you're actually asking him to have like a chunk gain when he makes his reception. Because the vast majority of his receptions, period, have been over 7.5. So you're really kind of just hoping he gets one reception on this one. And like the line is 1.5 receptions. So they're already telling us they think he's going to catch at least a pass, and then they're hanging a number that if he catches a pass, he's probably going over. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I love this number. I just think it's too low. I thought about the receptions too, but the hit rate is higher on the receiving yards than the reception, so I stayed off. But I think he's good. You know, some books you could actually take like 15 plus those odd numbers, 12 plus. I think like Fanatics, but I would take something like that. Besides just the 7.5, I think he's good for probably between 15 and 20. The Eagles were middle of the pack as far as defending receiving yards from running backs, so they were allowing. Over the last couple of weeks, Austin Eckler 17 yards, Josh Jacobs 40, Brian Robinson 17, Trooper Hubbard 15, so Justice Hill 15, Derrick Henry 29 the same game. So I think it's a little bit of some ladder potential in this one too.
We're already an hour in, but PropGod, the people need to know what else you're on here. So why don't you talk us through your other favorite picks? All
right. Now, when you look at the Kansas City defense, right, you know, you look at the rankings and you just you can't look at these games just like at the surface level, right? You look at the Chiefs, what they give up. You look at the Eagles, what they give up, and you can't find anything. That's what FTN comes in at, right? So I looked at the Chiefs defense, and when I watched them play, I noticed that they give up explosive plays through the air, but the numbers full season don't show you that. So what did I do? I went to Stats Hub, clicked on the deep passing, and what did I see? The Kansas City Chiefs are giving up the eighth most deep passing plays this season. That is a play of 20 or more air yards. And as far as the hold on, what's the rate? Deep throw rate. I'm so used to talking the explosive run rate. Deep throw rate. Kansas City is allowing the eighth highest percentage of deep throws at 13%. They have allowed what was the number I had? Deep throws.
As you find that prop, I will also mention that all of these numbers, they've gotten even worse in the second half of the season. They've been more vulnerable in the second half of the season, downfield and just in explosive plays in general.
Yeah, and there we go. So they allowed 25, so that was the eighth worst in the league. And that just brings me to Smitty. Whenever I see Devontae Smith at 19.5 for a longest reception, I feel like the line is wrong. Over the number in 11 out of 16 games this season, averaging a longest reception of 24 yards on the year. He's seen the Chiefs 3 times. You would imagine what the longest reception has been. It's as if, they just always find the holes in the Chiefs defense. He had a 37-yarder in 2021, a 45-yarder in the Super Bowl. That saw him last year in November, had a 41-yarder. Devontae Smith is actually averaging the longest reception of 41 yards against the Chiefs. So now I know you like to get dangerous and get ladders. So I'm taking the 19.5. I want to know, I know you're an Eagles guy. Is that on your radar? And what do you think about that look?
Yeah, I like it. It is up to 20.5 on Underdog. Does that give you any pause, or do you think it's?
I'm good up to 25.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I don't necessarily want to ladder this one because he gets so many of those targets like in that intermediate range where he then gets the yards after the catch needed to get there. I actually thought you were going to go to A.J. Brown on the longest reception when you started talking about these explosive plays, but I think I'm with you that I will take Devontae at 4 fewer yards than A.J. Because 24.5, it's a little bit tough to get there, and
it's not tough for AJ. I think they both could do it, but like you said, I just thought it was more of a discount.
I think part of it for me is like we know that the focus is going to be on Saquon and AJ Brown, and Devontae benefits from focus being on both of those guys. AJ only benefits on focus being on one of those guys. So I think the 20.5 for Devontae is probably my preference as well. If he went to 21.5, now it would be really, really tough to say, but 20.5 is. It's lower than what we typically see for receivers of his caliber, and especially for receivers that generate the explosive plays the way that Devontae does. So I do think this is a little low as well. We have 6 picks here now, by the way. So I think this could be good enough. as a 6-pick play. Do you have any other props here, Prop?
So I didn't get to the window yet, but I was looking at Hollywood Brown. What are your thoughts on him? It's kind of conflicted. I mean, he only played 4 games, right?
Yeah.
The receiving yards at 42.5 now. On the Sun books, you can get 39.5. I do think he'll be involved in this game. But I kind of want to just it's something I want to talk out, I guess you could say. I wasn't 100% confident in him. Did you look into him at all?
Yeah, I did. So I'm having a tough time with him because I think I lean the under just based on the fact that he should be better against man coverage, which we haven't necessarily seen. But Phil does play a lot of man coverage, so like my initial instinct was, hey, this could finally be the Hollywood Brown game in the postseason. But I don't think he's been doing that great of a job of separating against man coverage, which is why it's been worthy against man. And Philly's corners just don't allow separation. So if you have a guy who's already struggling to separate and then you put him in a lot of man coverage against really good corners, where is that separation coming from? So I lean under, but it's a tough one because on the surface, this seems like it could definitely be a good spot for Hollywood. Yeah. Using the DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data, the only weakness Philly has is wide receiver threes. It's why we were on DeMarcus Robinson in that game, and he had I think he was over 70 yards. Like he was had a really strong game. So I don't mind going to Juju Smith-Schuster if you're looking for kind of a secondary Kansas City pass catcher. Was finally on the field quite a bit. And it's only 14.5 for him.
Yeah, and he has 60 yards against Buffalo. So I thought about Juju, but it's just so ugly betting on Juju. You know, that's the only thing.
Part of that too, Prop, is TwoGun and I were talking about this in the Showdown aspect of the show. Is like it's so hard to figure out which Kansas City guys are going to be on the field on any given play, let alone who's actually getting the production. Yep. And I can tell you the reason why Juju had those 2 explosive plays were because Buffalo was playing a lot of zone coverage, and Kansas City went to read options went to RPOs. Sorry, not just read options, RPOs, to get Buffalo out of that zone tendency. So they were hitting Juju in the middle of the field over those linebackers when the linebackers came up to potentially defend the run. So maybe he was only on the field because they were trying to get them into man coverage. I do not know the answer to that question. So as you said, it's scary. But if I felt confident that any one of these quote unquote wide receiver threes for Kansas City were going to be on the field on a consistent basis, I'd go over on them because that has been the one vulnerability for Philly. And like all of their numbers are so incredibly low, whether it's 14.5 for Juju. I think it might be 11.5 for Hopkins.
Yeah, 11.5, 1.5
and
that's for DeAndre Hopkins. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because he wasn't on the field that much last game.
Yeah.
That's true. They just think he's hurt and sucks. No.
I think part of it is like they have the 2 wide receivers that are running the routes to actually catch passes, and they want that 3rd wide receiver to kind of be like a hybrid blocker type guy where so many of their quote unquote routes offensively in the passing game are get Worthy the ball quickly and have the other wide receivers block for him where they're not actually running routes. And I think they prefer Watson or Juju as that lead blocker over Hopkins. And that's part of why Hopkins isn't even on the field. And so I still trust Hopkins to make contested catches. I still trust him to find the soft spot in zones, but he can't do either of those things if he's standing on the sideline.
Yeah, and I'm looking like Worthy doubled him in targets against man. He had 61 targets to Hopkins' only 32 when he came over.
Yeah.
But Kelsey had 53 targets against man.
Yep.
You got anything? What's the 6 man? What do we have?
Real quick before we go over the 6 man, Prop, what do you think of under 19.5 for the longest reception for Travis Kelce? Because I think this one's pretty solid. Again, Philly is so damn good at preventing explosive pass plays. To me, this feels inflated just because of what he did against Houston. But on the season, like he's been under this more often than not. Philadelphia on the season has been really good against tight ends. Yes, they have been beaten up by Higbee and Ertz in the last couple of games, but Most of the reason why they were beaten up by those two guys is because the quarterbacks were forced to take check downs to them. If Kelsey catches a check down, I don't think he's getting to a 19.5-yard reception.
No, I'm not mad at that against the Philly defense. Looking into it a bit right now. As far as like the longest reception, the tight ends, they were the sixth best at stopping that this season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not mad at that look. That's a different angle too. I wouldn't. I never really look at Kelsey's longest reception, to be honest. For tight ends, I look at Kittle and Laporta a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm not mad at that. I'm looking at what he's done this season. He only had an 11-yarder against Buffalo too. So
we have a question here about Xavier Worthy rushing. I've heard multiple people talking about this one, so I think we should talk about it as well. It's at 6.5 yards. I'll start with you, TwoGun here. What do you think of Worthy's rushing? Do you want to go over this?
No, not really. I have to look at like his game log, and it's pretty mixed.
He's getting carries on a pretty consistent basis. He's gotten a carry.
Like one. Wait, no, he's getting like two.
His last 6 games are 1, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2. I think the big danger to this pick is it's very easy for something to happen like in the Houston game where that first carry, the defense sniffs it out. It's an 8-yard loss.
That's it.
And now you know, like, all right, number one, they're probably not going back to that. And even if they do, you were hoping that he had to get a 7-yard rush, not a 16-yard rush. So I think it's a very high risk pick. Let me throw this out to you guys. I think if I'm playing this, I'm either going under 1.5 or 1.34x, in which case you're hoping like that, right? He only gets one opportunity. Philly sniffs it out and they make the play. Or you also hit the under 1.5 if he just doesn't get a carry this game, if that's just not part of the game plan. Or I'm going to actually try to get like over 19.5, where maybe he gets 2 carries and one of them is a 16-yarder. Now he goes over that. So, Prop, what do you think about this idea of going to the alternate line, whether you're going under or over on it?
I'm kind of conflicted when it comes to the receiving rushing yards because of what you said. You know, they lose yards on that first carry, and you're just sweating out the rest of the game.
Yeah.
On if they can get to that number. As far as laddering it, he's done that twice this season. Or I'm sorry, 3 times actually. 16 yards against Buffalo. He had 30 yards and then 21 yards against the Ravens. So, I'm not mad at that angle. But as far as that under, what about those scenarios where he's throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage and they call it a rush or something like that? Because you know I've been burned a couple times like that on receivers or running backs to where it's called a rush instead of a reception.
Yeah.
So that's what I would be worried about when it comes to the under.
100%. One thing I will say there is there hasn't been a team better at defending those types of plays than Philadelphia because of how well they tackle. So I think if I had to take any pick on Worthy's rushing, I think it would be under 1.5 rushing yards. I don't know that it's good enough for me though. I would, if it got to like 1.5x on the under, maybe this gets bet up to 7.5 or 8.5, and then you get that extra multiplier on the under 1.5. I would definitely take it then. But let me ask you this, Prop. That actually brings up a thought. Like, do you think there's any value if you want an under on basically any player and just waiting until closer to game time? Because I got to think it's Super Bowl week. These numbers are more likely to go up than down. Wouldn't you think? Yeah,
I think they're going up. I don't. If you're waiting, you're gonna get the worst of the lines pretty much at this point. Even what's his name? P-Round might move by the time the Super Bowl gets here, because articles come out, people start putting putting the bets out there and things like that. I think the closer you get to the game, the closer you get to that FOMO of people being scared of missing out on getting that Super Bowl action in. So I think these props are going to go up as the week goes along.
All right. So the 6-pick play that we have here, Worthy under 21.5 longest reception. That's my favorite of the week. Mahomes to not throw an interception. Barkley under 127.5 rushing plus receiving yards, which correlates pretty well with the over 19.5 longest rush for Jalen Hurts. That's 2.17x, which means the 6-pick play, 48.8x. That is a huge, huge multiplier. P. Ryan over 7.5 receiving yards. Devontae Smith over 20.5 longest reception. Final point here, TwoGun, I have to imagine that you're pretty psyched for pick 6 this week, knowing how many people are going to be building some pick 6 plays, just trying to get action, and knowing that you're going to build better pick 6 slips than they are.
I mean, I hope I build better pick 6. We'll see. Yeah, just in general, my leans are that like it just might be a very clean game.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like, it just might be like field goals, and it's kind of like a little bit less scoring than people like, a little less yard. Like, it just might not blow up to be crazy. You know what I'm saying with yardage? Because if they're like the defense is playing clean, like, they're just, you might have these like 7 to 8 minute drives, and you just don't get the crazy, output when that happens.
Yeah. All right, guys. It's been an awesome NFL season, but it's coming to an end. Doesn't mean that we are out of things to do here at FTN. March Madness is coming up. PGA season is in full effect. And to that point, big announcement is contest sims are on the way for PGA. Should be just about a week away for us now. So make sure you are looking out for an opportunity to try those contest sims. There will be a 1 week minimum of a free trial with a part of any DFS subscription here at FTN Fantasy before we actually start charging for the contest sims themselves. So keep an eye out for that over the next couple weeks. They're going to be an absolute blast. This season has been an absolute blast. Thanks for joining me here, TwoGun and PropGod. And we'll be back next season, I guess, at this point.